Hi everyone, it's Pete here. Just to let you know, this episode of HHE Podcast covers a very difficult period of Sudanese history. So if you're feeling particularly sensitive, you might want to give this episode a miss. Otherwise, on with the show. History happened everywhere.
Hello, my name is Ryan Weir and I am here in the HHE studio with the Sudan success to my Sudan urge. It's Mr. Peter Goddard.
Was that a sudden pun?
It was, yeah.
I'm horrified. That is a heck of a way to open, Ryan.
Well, I don't want to be called Ryan in this episode, Pete. I want you to call me Lee.
Lee?
Sudan Lee.
Oh dear.
Now, Peter, last week the Derzolator was kind enough to give us first aid in Sudan during the late 1990s.
Didn't it just?
So why don't you tease the listeners with a little of what's coming up?
So today we're headed to sun-scorched North Africa, a land that's ancient, vast, and sometimes tricky to define. It's a country, it's a region, it's whatever you want it to be. Whilst we're there, we'll take a peek at some particularly pointy pyramids, and we'll meet a long-legged secretary you probably wouldn't want in your office. We'll also wade through Sudan's long and checkered history shaped by power, control and division on all sides. And because we're talking first aid, we'll start with the revelation that President Jimmy Carter might be the reason you never look at that blister on your foot in quite the same way again. And we'll meet a woman whose unwavering dedication to helping others put her right in the thick of things by caring for thousands in their most desperate hour. So, grab a triangular bandage, brace yourself for the sting of iodine, and get ready to assume the position. The recovery position, of course. Welcome to North Africa. Welcome to Nubia. Welcome to Sudan.
Right, well, I am very excited, Pete, genuinely. But before we go any further, there is just one thing I need to know, and that is where and what is Sudan?
Surprisingly difficult question, Ryan, because Sudan is a few things, depending on who's talking and what they're referring to. The Sudan is a geographical region that runs across the south of the Sahara. It goes all the way from Western Africa to Eastern Africa. But then again, Sudan is also a region in Northeast Africa, which comprises the sovereign countries of Sudan and South Sudan. Mm-hmm. Then again, as mentioned, Sudan is also a nation state, officially the Republic of the Sudan.
It's a lot of things, all wrapped up into one tussly fun ball.
Yes, indeed. For the purposes of the introduction section, where we do anthems and whatnot, I'm just going to talk about the Republic of the Sudan, though.
Okay.
This is a country that has a lot of neighbours. It borders Central African Republic, Chad to the west, Libya to the northwest, Egypt to the north, Eritrea and Ethiopia to the southeast, and, unsurprisingly, to the south, South Sudan.
Lots of friendly neighbours.
Indeed. The name Sudan, whichever bit you might be referring to, is believed to derive from the Arabic Bilad as-Sudan, meaning the land of the black people.
Oh, right.
So Sudan as a nation is fairly big. It's 1,886,000 square kilometres, or 728,000 square miles. Now that's a little over 3 times the size of France.
I mean, really, that is insane. I had no idea it was that big.
Well, it's actually Africa's 3rd largest country by area, behind Algeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo, and it used to be the biggest, but for reasons that I suspect will come up in your history section, the bottom bit fell off, and then it relegated it to 3rd place.
Yeah.
Yes.
That will come up.
Population-wise, 48 million people, a lot of whom are not getting along very well, but that again I'm going to leave to you. 97% of the people are Sunni Muslim, and the official languages, which I'm sure you'll explain why, are Arabic and English.
Yep, that'll come up too.
Good. The capital city is Khartoum, which sits at a river junction. The River Nile begins in Khartoum because it's where the Blue Nile and the White Nile, which come together to form the Nile. That's in Khartoum itself.
Bugs Bunny's my favourite cartoon.
Oh, good Lord. It's going to be a long hour. Geographically, we're talking flat plains. There are some mountain ranges to mix things up. It's unsurprisingly dry in the north, getting wetter and greener as you go south. Flag-wise, we're talking about a horizontal red, white and black bars with a green triangle poking in from the hoist side. These are classic pan-Arab colours you'll see in lots of the flags of the region. The design was a winning entry to a competition by Abdel Rahman Ahmed Al-Jali.
I mean, I don't want to be dismissive, but you haven't got a lot to work with, have you, using those colours?
Yeah, there's limited palette and there's only so many flag formations that we...
Yeah, exactly.
I can only imagine how boring the judging of that competition must have been. Next, someone's coming in with a hot pink with a lightning bolt coming through it. That would be like, yeah! The national anthem, Ryan, I'm sure you'd like to hear it.
I would.
It will kind of set the scene, I suspect, for your history section, because it's called Nanu Jund Allah Jund al-Watan, translated as We are soldiers of God, soldiers of the homeland. So, should we have a little listen?
Yeah, please.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, wow. What a start.
I like it. It's got a little swing to it that most don't have. So, funnily enough, the words were written by the poet Ahmed Mohammed Saleh, and the lyrics, in my opinion, quite in contrast to the tune, are quite martial. They've got lyrics that include, we are the lions of the jungle, the sons of wars, we do not fear death or fear engagements.
Okay.
And the tune was composed by Ahmed Morjan in 1955.
Yeah, it's got like a filmic quality to it.
It does, it does. Now, I do also at this point need to give a special shout out to South Sudan, whose national anthem is quite the contrast to Soldiers of God, Soldiers of the Homeland, because the South Sudan anthem is a song called South Sudan Oi, which is complete with an exclamation mark, and it translates roughly as South Sudan, hurrah!
Hurrah!
A very different approach to your national anthem there. And we rise to the big finish.
Oh, yeah. Okay, no, I'm a big fan of that. I thought that was good.
Now, Ryan, the national bird of Sudan appears on its national emblem, and it's kind of an interesting one, so I thought I'd bring it along. It's the secretary bird.
Oh, okay. It sort of takes notes, makes me a cup of coffee.
Exactly that. It's a funny old creature. It's a predatory bird, but it's really distinctive because it looks like someone's taken the body of a kind of eagle-type bird and then sellotaped it onto the long legs of a crane.
Right.
And then popped a little feathery headdress on it for good measure. And behaviour-wise, it's quite unbirdy, because it spends most of its time walking around. It doesn't fly. It can fly and it nests in trees, but most of the time it spends on the ground hunting, and rather boldly it's famous for killing snakes.
That is a good bird to have as your national animal.
It's great, isn't it? It's called the secretary bird because it can type at 60 words per minute.
Yeah. How big is this bird?
Tops out at about 1.3 metres or 4'3".
4'3".
Size of a small person, so that thing running at you, you would know about it.
No wonder it can pick up a snake.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Now, there's a theory that the secretary bird got its name because the feathers sticking out from his head reminded the 19th century Europeans of quill pens that would be tucked behind your secretary's ear. And its grey and black body kind of looked like their tailcoats. There is some debate. Some also say it's derived from an Arabic word, saka eter. So I prefer the evocative one, unsurprisingly.
Yeah, it's nice to imagine this bird running around, scribbling down notes.
Oi, zebras, get a move on. Do you want to be left behind to drown? No. Right, we'll get on the bloody ark then. And that goes for the rest of you too. I ain't standing here in the flipping rain for any longer than I have to, so get a bloody move on. Honestly, I spent years building this thing. Now I've got to share it with you useless lot, so don't make this any harder than it needs to be. Hey, Secretary Bird, where are you going? I told you I need you in my office. So get in there and start managing my diary. Yeah, we've all got jobs we don't want to do. Minor bird, why aren't you stocking the fire pits? That coal ain't going to shovel itself.
Ain't going to shovel itself?
Oh, of course. We're all very impressed, Mockingbird. You know, repeating everything I say sarcastically hasn't gotten old at all.
Hasn't got old at all.
Oh, Hummingbird, don't you start. And you, Butcherbird, put that turkey down. I swear, if it wasn't for the great tits, I'd throw myself overboard.
I'll throw myself overboard.
Now, Ryan, my throat's a bit raw, so I'm having some Sudan facts. I wonder if you could introduce them for me.
Oh, sure.
Sudan Facts!
Thank you very much. Where do you find pyramids, Ryan?
Egypt.
Sudan, but also Egypt.
Yeah.
Sudan is famous actually for having more than 200 pyramids, double the number of Egypt. They're known as Nubian pyramids, and you probably want to know how to tell the difference between your Sudanese pyramid and your Egyptian pyramid, aren't you?
Is it to do with the number of sides?
It is not.
Oh, I thought that was a good guess.
So your Nubian pyramid is pointier, basically. It's got a steeper slope, narrower base. An Egyptian pyramid has a broader base and a more shallow slope on its sides, basically. So if you take a Nubian pyramid, push it down, that's going to look like your Egyptian pyramid.
Okay, or take an Egyptian one and stretch it up.
You could do that if you have the material to hand. And finally, Ryan, Sudan is home to 3 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. 2 of them are Nubian archaeology, steep-sided pyramids and whatnot, and temples, as you might expect. And for the Pyramidiverse, there is a national park, Mukawa Island Marine National Park, which is a nature reserve which features some coral and a population of the endangered but lovely dugong.
Ah, the dugong. We love the dugong. We've talked about the dugong in the past, haven't we?
We love a dugong, so I thought we'd give them credit and Sudan credit for being home to some lovely dugong.
I find it amazing that they've got 3 UNESCO heritage sites.
Yes, I mean, I can't imagine the gift shops making a lot of money, put it that way.
But I suppose we'll come to that very soon.
In a minute, after this.
Hey, Pete.
Hey, Ryan.
You heading out?
Yeah, I'm just about to go for a run, yeah.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
Yep.
Did you know in 1983 there was a Sudanese marathon runner called Muhammad Ali Yagoub, and he competed in an international marathon event in Egypt, and he ran the entire race barefoot.
Yeah, that's great, but I'm headed out now, so...
Yeah, he finished 3rd place, but I mean, that's not bad though, really, is it? Considering he ran with no shoes on, eh?
Amazing, whatever. Look, can you just get out of the way?
Some people say running without shoes on is actually better for you.
Get out of the way, Ryan.
It improves form, strengthens foot muscles, reduces the risk of injuries to knees and ankle joints, and it all just goes to show we don't really need running shoes.
Oh, right, I see. Ryan, my shoes, where are they?
All right, here's the thing. You remember when you said the box over there is my expensive new running shoes and don't touch them on the pain of death?
Yes.
And you also remember saying, take out the recycling in the hall right now or I'll fill your underwear with killer bees.
So you threw my new shoes out with the recycling?
Yes.
I can't run without shoes, Ryan.
Well, tell that to Muhammad Ali Yagoub.
Yeah, and he ran in the Egyptian desert. I'm doing 3 laps around the park.
Think of your form, Pete. Think of your efficiency of movement.
Ryan,
Yes, Pete.
you should start running.
Like, for my health?
In a way, yeah. I'm giving you a head start before I pound you into the pavement. Come here. Get over it, you little
Get off
toe
me.
rag. This is typical Ryan. So, Ryan, I think we know where we are now. We're in Northeast Africa. We're in the country of Sudan. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened there, starting roughly at the beginning of time, and get us up to today, if you could.
You know I love doing that, but on this occasion, it kind of makes sense.
It does.
Because the history of Sudan really starts around 800,000 years ago. This is when early Homo erectus was walking around.
The very earliest of early man is that.
Yeah. And he's making a bunch of pointy stone tools, basically to butcher animals and presumably other early Homo erectus. Now, a lot of time passes until around 100,000 years ago when early Homo sapien decides that he's going to redefine the art of industrial stone weaponry by creating new pointy kill rocks, things like arrowheads and spear points, and the world's first fishhooks.
Oh, I bet they went viral pretty much immediately.
Now, a bunch of early man decides that they're going to take their rocks on the road, and so they leave Africa, basically becoming prehistoric influencers as they head out on their tour of the world.
Hit that like button.
Exactly. But, Pete, this was terrible timing, because had they waited around for just another several tens of thousands of years, they would have found that all the boring old wasteland that they'd been living in had transformed into an absolute wonderland, thanks to a change in the weather that caused the Sahara to become wet, green, and full of tasty new animals to poke with kill rocks.
That's essentially my plan for living, is to wait until my environment suddenly becomes much nicer.
Yeah, just wait a couple of tens of thousands of years and maybe Croydon will shift into a tropical paradise.
I'm on year 4.
Hang in there, buddy.
All right.
Now, all those early men and women that stayed behind got to enjoy this new period of luxury, and they tossed in their hunter-gatherer hats for shiny new early pastoralism hats instead. Now, what does that mean? That means domesticating cows. Now, around 2500 BCE, the situation shifts, and early farmer gets a bit big for his boots, and he thinks, you know what would be better than herding cows, Pete? Herding people.
That would be better for the herder.
Exactly. So he becomes early king, and he presides over a vast territory which he calls the Kingdom of Kush.
It's a cushy number.
Now, in his reign, he has several large structures built, and much to his surprise and great fortune, huge gold reserves are found buried in the ground.
Nice. He's looked at that and gone, that's going to be handy.
Yeah. Now, this gives him a lot of influence and power throughout the region, and surprising nobody, other powerful people in the area want that power for themselves.
That will happen.
People like Egyptian pharaoh Thutmose I, who coined the phrase, "Why trade when you can invade?" which we've all been saying ever since.
We do. I keep coming back to that in the office.
Yeah. And so he goes in, he takes over the place around 1500 BCE. Thus, Kush becomes part of the Egyptian Empire, and they adopt their gods, they use hieroglyphs, they have an unhealthy obsession with pyramids, they build the largest collection of them in the world, Pete. Around 240 of them.
That's enough for anyone, I think.
The people of Kush kind of have enough of sandals and mummies and dog-faced gods, and they look to take back the place as their own, with King Pi leading the Kush army into Cairo, where he conquers Egypt and becomes the 25th Egyptian dynasty, under, may I add, the awesome nickname, the Black Pharaohs. Yes, I did look it up, because I thought Black Pharaohs is an awesome name for a band, and it is the name of a band. It's the name of a punk rock band from Texas that absolutely shreds, and it sounds like this.
He rides through town in his limousine, and he's looking for the rockinest combo he's ever seen.
Nice!
Yeah. So anyway, the Black Pharaohs rule Egypt for about a century or so, until a series of attacks by the Persians and the Greeks and the Romans caused them to just throw their hands in the air and scrap the whole idea and head back home to Kush, where they settle in for a couple hundred years until around 350 CE, when their civilization just stops.
That does happen, doesn't it? It's more in history than I expected, that things just go, and that just finished, and we're not really sure.
We're done with this. Now, that leaves a vacuum, and into that vacuum steps the Christians.
Ah, they love a vacuum.
They do, and they're looking for some ideally placed real estate that is going to help prevent Muslims from rampaging across the land. So, they lay claim to the region, and they do exactly what they intend. They defend the area from the rampaging Arabs until around 652 CE, when one particularly bloody fight leads both sides to come to the table and just agree on a peace treaty.
That's probably for the best.
Now, it must have been a particularly bad battle, Pete, because the resulting peace treaty lasted for the next 600 years.
That's a solid treaty.
It's pretty good, yeah. Apparently it's the longest peace treaty in history.
Wow.
But peace doesn't last forever, though, because in the mid-1500s, Islam does start to go on the rampage again, spreading throughout Sudan, but not through swords and stabbing, instead through trade and intermarrying, the slowly approach.
Ah, that's one way to do it.
And so this resulted in the creation of the Funj Sultanate of Sennar, which ruled for the next 300 years between 1504 to 1821. Now, unfortunately, a large part of that African Arabic culture involves slavery, Pete. Huge numbers of Sudanese sold off to slave owners in Egypt and the Ottoman Empire. In 1820, the Egyptians, feeling, all nostalgic about the good old days of owning Kush, decide that they're going to invade the place all over again.
Yeah, we've seen this happen so many times, haven't we? They've got some good stuff. Let's go get it.
But this time, they decide they're going to take some friends with them, and so they get some eager support from both the British and the French. And thus begins the period of modern colonial history, where, as colonizers tend to do, administration is centralized and exploitation is maximized.
Well, you've got to get those profits in.
You do, and during this period, slavery was the main form of profits. So slavery was industrialized, and the local people experienced daily raids on their villages that saw tens of thousands of men, women, and children captured, put into chains, and sold to the highest bidder for God only knows what reasons that they wanted them. Now, facing all this brutality, a resistance formed, spearheaded by a guy called Mohammed Ahmed, known to his people as the Expected One.
I think it's better to be a surprise, though, if you're fighting someone, isn't it?
But known as the Surprise.
Where did he come from?
I think Pete the Warrior sounds a little bit too much like Pete the Warrior.
Pete the Anxious is probably more accurate in any event.
Anyway, so Ahmed leads a jihad against the colonizers. He raises a militia, and in 1885, he attacks and captures the capital city of Khartoum. And in the process, he kills the British general in charge, and that does not go over well back in London.
No, they don't love it when their representatives are killed abroad, do they?
No, they do not. And so the rebels rule for about a decade until the British return in 1898 under the guise of Field Marshal Horatio Herbert Kitchener, the first Earl of Kitchener, a man with more titles than morals.
In that he has any.
Yes, and he quickly takes the place back with help from some nifty new weaponry that includes artillery, machine guns, and gunboats.
That's another nickname I'd like. The one with all the machine guns.
Now, from that point on, the British are very definitely in charge. technically Britain and Egypt are joint rulers, but in practice it's the British who are controlling things. And it was the British who decided that the best way to help the country was to split it into two halves, making an Arabic north and a Christian south.
That sounds like something that definitely won't come back to bite us later.
Inevitably, there are future consequences. Because the locals don't like any of that, Pete. They don't want to be split up. And so an independence movement restarts. There are 70 years of struggle until 1956 and Sudan finally gains its independence. And their problems are solved forever, Pete.
Great. Shall we move on?
Except not really, because there is enough division that's been created over those 70 years among the people that this independence only results in another 50 years of conflict. 50 years that covers two civil wars that start over arguments about territory and escalate with intense arguments over the discovery of oil and then boil over when someone has an idea to impose Islamic law on everyone.
Right.
By the 1990s, which is sort of our time period, Sudan is now deep into its second civil war. Millions of people are dead and the economy is ruined. In terms of first aid in the late 90s, for those lucky enough not to have been butchered, they would find themselves facing a healthcare system that consisted mostly of being told to try and not get shot.
I mean, it's good advice, but you'd hope for a bit more than that from your government and or society.
Anyone unlucky enough to actually need some first aid at that time would have been gifted with probably a single aspirin, a used bandage, and told, good luck out there.
Oof.
Thankfully, this was also a period when the international community steps up, they get involved, aid workers travel from all around the world to help patch people up, even if that meant dodging bullets themselves. The civil wars end with a peace agreement in 2005, but not before the government institutes a scorched earth policy, which results in villages being burned to the ground, civilians massacred, and a resulting famine and disease crisis that kills somewhere between 2.5 to 3 million people.
Oh, that's huge. And that's at the end of 50 years of other war as well.
And let's not forget that while the Second Civil War was coming to an end, another crisis erupted in Darfur in western Sudan when the government armed militias to fight against non-Arabic rebels. This leads to a genocide of another 300,000 people, an incident which the International Criminal Court later said was a crime against humanity. But unbelievably, Pete, things get even more complicated in 2011. South Sudan declares themselves independent and becomes the world's newest country. In principle, separating two warring people should have been a decent move towards peace by, stopping the fighting. But in practice, it only agitated things further, with South Sudan taking most of the oil reserves with them and leaving Sudan's economy to just collapse.
Yeah, that's going to cause a certain amount of resentment, I suspect.
Yeah. Now, there are mass protests, there's government overthrows, there's a failed attempt at democracy, there's a military coup in 2021, followed by, yes, another civil war in 2023. This time between the official Sudanese army, the SAF, and the less official paramilitary organisation, the RSF. Now, at one point, these two were considered essentially brothers in arms, but they got into a fight when the government tried to formally integrate the RSF into the army, and so both claimed parts of the country and a division was created. Support between both fighting forces divided the country. Around 150,000 people have been killed, and 11 million people since 2023 have been moved or displaced.
Good Lord, that's massive.
Now, sadly, as of time of recording in February 2025, the killing does continue, and it doesn't look to be going away anytime soon. So yeah, from a history once filled with greatness, we find Sudan today the literal embodiment of a country ruled by violence and oppression. And as ever, it's the people of Sudan who we look to with sympathy, and we wish them all the best in finding a path out of their darkest times.
Oof, I'm quite overcome by that. It's horrible when we have to face these places that are still in the depths of misery and hardship. Sorry, guys. Good luck. I don't know what to say. I feel powerless. I guess this is probably a good time to perhaps suggest a place where people could donate to help the people of the country.
All right, yeah, no, that's a good idea. Obviously, there are a number of organisations that are out there trying to help the people of Sudan. But if you would like to contribute to help, then you can make a donation at unicef.org.uk/donate. That's unicef.org.uk/donate. All right, Pete. Well, there you go. We know where it is. We know what the history is. But this episode is about first aid in Sudan during the late 1990s. And I'll be honest, Pete, I don't know what first aid is.
Well, I shall not be coming to you as soon as I'm wounded, but
I can give you the kiss of life.
I'd rather you didn't. I'll take my chances with the Grim Reaper. The dictionary says first aid is the simple medical treatment that is given to somebody before a doctor comes or before the person can be taken to a hospital. So we're talking about an early intervention administered by not necessarily an expert in medicine. Now, first aid, it won't surprise you to learn, has been around for a long time. There's portrayals of the bandaging of wounds on classical Greek pottery, so we're talking 500 BCE. There's a thing called the Edwin Smith Papyrus, an Egyptian text that talks about bandages and splints and poultices, all of which you could say were first aid. But there is a sort of general consensus, or certainly from my light Googling, that the father of first aid is a man named Friedrich Esmark.
Friedrich Esmark. He sounds German.
Yeah, very much so. He was a physician in 1848. His main fields of interest were military surgery and first aid. He must have been pretty good because he became Surgeon General in the German army.
You're pretty hot on your subject matter if you become Surgeon General.
Exactly so. And he eventually published various books, including First Aid on the Battlefield and First Aid to the Injured.
Which makes sense, right? Because if you're on a battlefield, you don't want to be sitting around waiting for a medic to come to you. You want to have a little pack on you that you can just patch yourself up.
No, I'd brush people off and go, no, you don't appear qualified enough. I'm going to need a surgeon at this point.
Yeah.
Now, here in the UK, Esmark's work came to the attention of Surgeon Major Peter Shepherd, who thought this first aid business might be quite a good idea to teach the civilians as well as the military.
Yeah, it makes sense. The more people that know it, the better, right?
It would seem handy. So 1878, with a Dr. Coleman, he conducts one of the first public first aid class in Woolwich. And he also prepares a manual at the request of the Central Ambulance Committee of the Order of St. John's of Jerusalem. That is to say, St. John's Ambulance.
Oh, is that where that comes from? Okay.
So now this, I believe, is probably a UK phenomenon. For our international listeners, St. John's Ambulance is a very well-known group of, I think, largely volunteers who attend events and provide first aid services to all sorts of places.
Yeah, like if you go to a concert and you faint, it's going to be St. John's Ambulance that comes and collects you and makes sure that you're okay.
Exactly right. And of course, to do first aid, you're going to need a first aid kit.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, so there's quite a good claim that the first commercially available first aid kit came courtesy of the company Johnson & Johnson in 1888.
Okay, makes sense.
Apparently, Robert Wood Johnson, one of the founders of Johnson & Johnson, I assume the other one was also a Johnson, he met a chief surgeon of a railway company, and he said their workers often died of injuries because there was nothing there to make that initial intervention.
Right.
So again, I guess waiting for the doctor effectively. So he did some research and he found out what supplies would be useful, and he creates a commercial first aid kit which had things like wound dressings and surgical tapes and sutures, so you could stitch yourself up. You see that less, I think, in first aid kits these days.
Yeah. You'd think you probably want to throw some snacks in there too.
Yeah, but how many times are you going to go to the first aid kit going, someone's diabetic and they really need someone took their chocolate again. Why is the Kit Kat gone, people? How many times?
I do love a Kit Kat.
Well, exactly. And that's why Bob died.
Yeah, with a Kit Kat, you get 4 goes, don't you, to help save someone?
That's true, yeah. Every day you come back and I'll just have another one.
I'm having another diabetic problem.
You're not diabetic, Ryan. You're just greedy.
Yes, I am. Next up in the Viper Pit is an inventor looking to secure funding for a revolutionary new approach to first aid delivery.
Hello, Vipers. My name is Donald, and I'm here asking for £100,000 for 5% of my company, First Aid Bot, an advanced digital first aid kit for the modern age.
Oh, sounds good. Okay.
First Aid Bot's advanced AI will instantly recognise dangerous situations and preemptively deploy a high-velocity trauma kit directly at you before any injury can occur.
Well, that sounds dangerous, love.
No, not at all. Let me demonstrate. Vipers, this is Gary.
Hi.
Gary, please pick up the carving knife.
Okay.
Oh my God.
Blimey.
Any questions?
Well, I'll start. What you've created here is artillery with bandages.
That's right. We call it high-speed healthcare.
Yeah, well, for that reason, I'm out.
Okay, thank you.
How does it handle serious injuries, love?
Great question. For extreme pain, First Aid Bot fires a morphine grenade, releasing a soothing cloud of opioids.
Right. Well, I'll tell you where I am, love. This is a war crime, and I'm out.
Okay, thank you.
Right, well, that just leaves me, and frankly, I agree with the other vipers. This thing is dangerous, immoral, and likely to kill people.
Okay.
And that's why I'm making you an offer.
Oh, fantastic.
100,000 for 50%. I know some businessmen under an arms embargo who'd love this medical device.
It's a deal. All right, Ryan, the challenge was reasonably substantial. Sudan, 1995 to 2000, first aid. What have you got? Bring it together. Bring it home, buddy.
Okay, well, P, I want you to imagine that it's the mid-1990s.
Of course. Oh, gosh, you've started. I was surprised there that you started in the right time period.
Yeah, no, it is, yeah. You and I, Pete, we are living in a small village in Sudan.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's hot, it's dusty, and we have a problem, Pete. There is no water.
That is a problem.
Yeah, well, there is a well, but it's miles away, and we're going to have to walk to get there, and I don't want to walk because, as I said, it's hot and it's dusty, and we don't have any water to hydrate us on the walk to go get the water.
Yeah, and you say we. I'm thinking this is more of a you situation, if I'm honest.
So, yeah, you and I are going to have to make do with the next best thing, Pete, and that is a nearby pond.
Oh.
Yeah, so we head on over to the pond and we grab our little cups and we sate our thirst with sips of lovely, delicious pond water.
Yum.
Problem solved, right?
I feel I've stored something up for the future, but let's see where this takes us.
Yeah. Yes, no, this is not problem solved, Pete, because whilst the problem isn't immediate, we don't know it as we swallow our refreshing pond water, but unbeknownst to us, with every sip we take, we are inviting a literal nightmare into our bodies. Now, fast forward 1 year later. Suddenly, we notice a strong burning sensation in our legs. Now, there's not much we can do about the burning, so we just sort of keep an eye on it until one day a blister forms.
Oh.
Yeah, now it's nasty. It's about the size of a penny, and it's sore and it's itchy, and so sore and itchy, in fact, that we just keep scratching at it until eventually, you know, the bubble that covers the blister, well, that bursts.
Well, that's gross.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing this to the table, Ryan.
Well, if you think that's gross, hang on in there, because that is when the nightmare really begins. Because with the seal broken over the blister, we see a thin white worm wriggle out from under the skin.
Oh, no. Okay, I need to strap in here.
You do, yeah. Because this is a Guinea worm, the adult version of the larvae that we drank from the pond water.
Okay, and that's fine, and it's just going to pop out and everything's going to be fine.
Well, in my case, Pete, I'm a bit lucky because I see just the one worm in my wound. But sadly, as you look down, you're going to discover several worms wriggling out of your bloody blister hole.
Okay, keep hanging in there, listeners.
All right, so clearly we have a problem, right? There's no denying that. Here we are in Sudan with worms crawling their ways out of our bodies. What are we going to do? Pull them out?
Yeah.
No, that's wrong.
No, okay.
Because if we do decide to just grab and pull on that little sucker, it's going to break, leaving the rest of the 3-foot-long worm to rot inside us. And what that might do then is cause a severe infection that will likely cripple us for the rest of our agonising lives.
Okay, I'm going to take plan B then. What's plan B, Ryan?
So if you can't pull them out, what are you going to do? Well, there is no quick method of getting rid of them. We're left with only one option, and that is to slowly and painfully wind the worm around a stick and day by day, inch by inch, over the next couple of months, slowly draw the worm out until it's completely removed.
Oh man, I can barely resist picking out a scab. No way I'm not going to give that a yank at some point and speed the process up.
Yeah, no, that's a bad idea. Anyway, for us, Pete, this is just an imagination game, right? It's a nightmare horror movie for sure.
I don't like this game at all.
No, but in Sudan in the 1990s, this is a very real experience for tens of thousands of people. There is no way around it, Pete. The Guinea worm, or Dracunculus medanensis, to give it its proper science name, is one of the most horrifying parasites on the planet. Now, it's been invading human bodies for millennia. There are reports from ancient Egyptians calling it a fiery serpent because of the burning pain that it causes. But here's the good news, Pete. It's actually ridiculously easy to prevent. And it doesn't need expensive drugs. It doesn't need any fancy technology. You just need clean water, which can be produced by a simple cloth filter that costs pennies to make. The problem is, though, is that here in Sudan and in other places around the world, the dracunculus can thrive. And it was a problem so big that in the 1980s, an estimated 3.5 million cases of Guinea worm were recorded across both Africa and Asia. And that is where we meet our unlikely hero, a peanut farmer from Georgia who happened to be the former president of the United States.
Oh, I think I know who we're talking about. Is it Jimmy Carter?
It's Jimmy Carter, the 39th president. Now, he wasn't exactly remembered as America's most popular leader, but history has since gone on to show that he did serve with integrity, dedication, and a passion for making life better for people. Not just those in America either, but all over the world. In fact, following his presidency in 1982, Carter and his wife, Rosalind, they start something called the Carter Center. It's a non-profit committed to alleviating human suffering by preventing conflicts and improving world health. Now, in 1986, while listening to a talk about tropical diseases that perhaps some of the more modern politicians would just sleep through, Carter learned about the devastating impacts of the Guinea worm. He called it a forgotten disease of forgotten people. And he became determined that his centre would not just be of help to people affected by the parasite, but actually be the leading force in a global effort to eradicate it altogether. And so what was his solution? Well, it was simple. It was provide water filters for communities that were suffering from the worm. And so he created these filters, basic but brilliant, just a piece of fine mesh cloth that would strain out the tiny larvae before they could be consumed. It was a genuine, life-saving first aid innovation that cost less than $1 per filter. And so the centre starts in a handful of countries. They install water filters in various different locations with loads of success. They expand to 19 more countries, including places like Mauritania, Chad, Kenya, Pakistan, and others. But when it comes to Sudan's turn in 1995...
Oh, that sounds like something you were delighted to learn.
It hit a massive roadblock. Now, you might remember, Pete, from the history section, I talked about the Civil War.
The Civil Wars, I suspect.
Indeed, yeah. Well, it was raging full force at this point, Civil War II, and all the villages that needed help the most were in these remote areas that were controlled by the various warring factions. The roads were surrounded with landmines. Basically, it was impossible for anyone to access these areas safely. There just wasn't an option where you could just walk into a Sudanese village and just hand out filters without it becoming essentially a suicide mission. And so, for the sake of Sudan's health, Carter did something extraordinary. He stepped back into international politics and he personally worked with all the parties involved to negotiate what became known as the Guinea Worm ceasefire. Now, this wasn't just any old ceasefire. Basically, it meant that all the warring parties agreed to a full 6-month suspension of conflict, specifically so that health workers could go in and distribute these water filters. This became the longest humanitarian ceasefire in history.
Yeah, I suppose there's an element of the common foe, right? Everyone looks at this Guinea worm, and as I was rightly horrified, and perhaps that's enough to go, oh, I think whatever we might be fighting about, that's worse. Let's get rid of it.
Well, exactly. And it was during this 6 months of peace that Carter's health workers went in and they visited over 2,000 villages in Sudan. They distributed more than 200,000 cloth filters, along with other vitamins and medicines while they were there. But they didn't stop there. When the conflict resumed, they continued their work regardless of the danger. They just continued on anyway, and they distributed out another 600,000 filters over the next 4 years. Nearly 1 million filters across Sudan. And the results? Pretty miraculous, Pete. In 1996, 118,000 reported cases of Guinea worm in Sudan. In 2000, 4 years later, the cases dropped by more than half to 55,000.
Wow.
8 years later, in 2008, there were 0 reported cases. In fact, the last reported case was in 2018, when 4 people on the South Sudan border contracted the parasite. Now, this was enough to get the Carter Center back in action. They joined Sudan's Ministry of Health by working with village volunteers to go door to door, essentially, house to house, searching and distributing cloth filters where they'd either worn through or they'd been taken away. And it worked. No new cases have been reported in Sudan since 2018.
You can't beat that result.
No, it's pretty impressive. He died as an ex-president, Pete, a Nobel Peace Prize recipient, and if you're looking for first aid in Sudan during the late 1990s, you could do no better than Jimmy Carter, the man who literally paused a war to help people who were suffering and in pain. Now that is what I call first aid.
Absolutely. Oh, that was a terrific story with a frankly horrible start, Ryan. You really had me in the first half, I'm not going to lie.
Just don't get blisters on your feet, people.
Oh, yeah, that's nasty. Filter my water, that's what I've learned.
Yeah, wriggly worms. Psst, you awake?
Yeah, I can't sleep.
Yeah, same.
There used to be millions of us. Now we're the last ones left.
I know. Will nobody think of the plight of the endangered parasitic worm?
Yeah, and it's all the fault
No, don't say it.
I don't care anymore. Jimmy freaking Carter.
No, shut up, he'll hear you.
I don't care. Come and get me, Carter. Put me out of my misery, honestly. I mean, what kind of psychopath declares war on a whole species? We weren't hurting anybody.
Well, I mean,
all right, fine, sure, we were drilling our way through muscle tissue and bursting out of human flesh in agonising slow motion.
causing generations of humans to suffer all over the globe.
But that's just what we do, isn't it? Does it really justify a systematic campaign of extermination?
Exactly.
I mean, where's our conservation effort?
Where's the Save the Guinea Worm Fund?
And all because President Jimmy Carter wants every last one of us dead.
Handing out filters and teaching basic hygiene.
Who does he think he is?
And you know what the worst thing is?
What?
In the early 90s, there were millions of us. But then he had to show up, didn't he? And now what?
Well, it's just you and me, isn't it? Swimming around this muddy puddle like a pair of lost shoelaces.
Exactly. We have to call it what it is. Genocide.
And all for what, eh? So humans can be happy, healthy, and free from excruciating pain? So selfish.
It's game over, man. We are done. Kaput. Extinct.
No, you know what? I refuse to accept that. All we need is one more infestation. It'll put us right back on the map.
Okay, and how exactly do you propose we do that?
Well, look, I know it's a long shot, but I've heard there's a place where we could recover, thrive even.
Really?
Yeah, a magical place where nobody's telling the people how to stay healthy. Public health policies either minimal or, some even say, entirely absent. It's called Florida. Oh, wait, can you hear that?
He's coming for us. I told you not to say his name.
Swim for your life!
Oh my God! He's got the All right, Peter, I've done my bit. Time for you to entertain us with some stories of first aid in Sudan during the late 1990s.
I've got to say hats off to you for that last section, Ryan, because I really struggled with my research and I thought I was going to land on stony ground at the end, but fortunately in my research, I eventually came across a book called Footprints in the Dust, subtitles Nursing, Survival, Compassion and Hope with Refugees Around the World. And this was by a lady who had spent time in various countries, as you may expect from the title, including Sudan.
Oh, right.
So I'm going to let someone who has first-hand experience talk to us about first aid in Sudan. But first, we'll let her introduce herself.
My name is Roberta Gately, a humanitarian aid worker and an author. I first was aware of Sudan probably in the 90s during one of their many civil wars. And I was aware of it because of patients who came into the ER. I worked in a busy inner city ER in Boston. And in the 90s, I was asked, that's when the Lost Boys of Sudan started appearing, and the UN had set up a refugee camp in Kenya. And I was asked to go by an aid group. Then there was trouble in the refugee camp, and I never went. However, I did go to that camp in the year 2000. So the camp was called Kakama, and it held refugees from all of the crisis zones in Africa. Uganda, Angola, Somalia, Ethiopia, including Sudan, which actually had the largest number of refugees. So that was where I first got to meet people of Sudan and hear their stories.
I've got to say there's probably a difference between the ER of a Boston hospital and a Sudanese refugee camp, right?
I think there is going to be a difference, and we're going to find out a little bit about it. So here we have it with a nurse, Sudan or Sudanese people in the first instance, in the 90s up to 2000. So I think I've snuck into the place, time and topic here.
How brave do you have to be, Pete? Hats off, right?
Well, we'll talk about that a little bit as well. She mentioned in that excerpt the Lost Boys of Sudan. That's a reference to the children who were displaced or orphaned during the Second Sudanese Civil War. But it wasn't just in Kenya that Roberta encountered Sudan. She actually went to Sudan itself a little bit after her time period, 2003, I think it was. But she arrived there, she had to set something up, and it was a difficult experience because she was given some interesting limitations, which I'll let her tell us about.
In 2003, what they finally called a genocide broke out in North Darfur in Sudan, which is northwest of Khartoum. And at first, President Bashir, the dictator, who created that genocide and was killing his own citizens in Darfur, wouldn't allow aid workers in. But then he realized if he didn't allow us in, it was a loss of money. It was a loss of resources for him, jobs for his people. So they allowed us in. We were told we couldn't speak to any of the people, but we could set up camps and take care of them.
Wow.
So a tricky scenario. Go help these people. Don't talk to anyone on the way.
Don't talk to anyone.
So Roberta found herself heading to Sudan and asked her what she did there and how she found the place. And this is what she said.
It is a vast wasteland. And so we went to the town of El Fasher and were designated, along with some other aid groups, to help create a refugee camp. And these were not really refugees. They were displaced from Darfur, people who were leaving their villages, coming to the town of El Fasher just for some safety. Because if there's foreigners there, they're less likely to be bombed or targeted. So imagine literally a vast wasteland. And we went out and just surveyed it and decided with some other aid groups who would do water and sanitation. I was with the International Rescue Committee. We decided on health care. We literally built a clinic within days. This German man, whose name I forget, he was really awesome. He just showed up. He was an engineer. I think he was one of those like roaming adventurers. And he literally helped us build a clinic. I was the medical person, and I went with our logistics manager. And between the two of us, we actually got our little clinic up and running.
We talk about altruism, but I mean, these people are astonishing, Pete.
Yeah, it makes my popping a £10 note into someone's charity pot feel a bit inadequate, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I love the idea of this roaming engineer who just goes, hello, what do you want? Clinic? Yeah, all right, I'll help.
Yeah, the man with no name.
Yeah, so they managed to just make this clinic in a refugee camp. And I asked her to describe the clinic. What did they actually build there? And this is what she said.
Very basic. The walls are really made of canvas and blue tarpaulin, the UN tarpaulin. And the services that we provide are mostly assessment, malnutrition care, and medical care. And the World Health Organization provides emergency kits, and they're designed for each region of the world, and they're kept in certain areas in the world. Geneva has a lot of them. And the one for Africa contains enough supplies for a village of 10,000 for 3 months. And it includes medicines, some malnutrition supplements that kids can eat. And that's enough to supply for the kinds of things we expect. TB, malaria, typhoid, antibiotic for injuries, antibiotics for other things. And we also liaise with UNICEF and WHO to provide vaccines and equipment so that we can deliver babies and do very basic stuff. There was a very small, very rudimentary hospital in El Fasher, but they were able to do surgery. So, for instance, one day we had a boy with appendicitis, and we could send him in there to have his appendix taken out.
Wow, I mean, just a few things that they have to deal with. But yeah, I mean, everything she's mentioning there, I'm like, of course, yeah, appendicitis, women having babies, let alone diseases and just general injuries. Everything that you can possibly think of a hospital's got to deal with, they're going to be faced with.
Yeah, it really surprised me that it was much more pre-packaged than I thought, the way she describes these kits that you get. I guess it's like your first aid kit in the kitchen suddenly magnified 10,000 times. This is huge, enough to supply 10,000 people. I thought that was really remarkable. But, they covered a lot of issues, but I didn't want to just portray this about Westerners saving the day. Roberta and co had support from local people as well, and they used a mix of traditional and modern medicine, as she described.
we did have interaction with the traditional medicine. Midwives delivered lots of babies and actually took care of people's illnesses and complaints. They had a fair amount of expertise. And some of the Sudanese doctors, I'm not sure if they went to school in Khartoum or elsewhere, were also pretty nice and pretty smart.
Nice, it's good to hear. A multicultural effort.
A multicultural effort. So the goal was to not just put a sticking plaster on things, ironically, but to have a more sustainable solution. That would require the support of government health bodies. And that itself, though, could result in some tricky situations. And Roberta described one to me.
Okay.
So we definitely interacted with the locals. And the Sudan Ministry of Health didn't mind that part, hiring people. They would actually send us names of people we should hire. We didn't always hire who they wanted. We didn't trust Bashir's government. He was the one who'd created this crisis. But we did interact with them, and we were told explicitly no pictures, no interviews. And I was writing, actually for the BBC, some articles and for a nursing journal. So I needed pictures and I wanted to speak to people. The only way you can really help is to know their story. So one day, Alan and I, we were just about finished. We were going to open our clinic in a few days and the Ministry of Health showed up. He was a pompous ass. And I had a camera in my hand and Alan gave me a dirty look. And actually I had a pocket in my shirt and I put it in. I didn't realize I hadn't turned it off. But he was going on and on about how great he was and what could we do for him. And suddenly, I must have crossed my arms to listen. And the camera started clicking away. And Alan, the manager I was with, looked at me. He was ready to kill me. And I was like, oh, my God, I'm going to be arrested. Because they had said we would be, and I'm kicked out of the country. But this guy kept going on, and he was so enamored of his own voice, he never heard the camera and never caught me.
I mean, I don't want to be crass, but my sphincter is tight, Pete. My God.
You're going to need you're going to need some first aid on that, my friend. Yes, that was a tense moment, wasn't it? And you did ask about risk earlier, and I followed that up with a question about how risky was it in that environment. And this is what she told me.
A lot.
Actually, not so much as you'd think.
All right.
So there definitely was risk. There were some other aid workers who were killed. There were lots of landmines in Darfur, and especially in the distant villages when we would go, there was danger. But I always felt, and I think most aid workers do, that by virtue of what we do, it's in their best interest to keep me safe. So don't kill me, keep me safe. I can take care of your mother's cough.
Yeah, I feel like there's a little underplaying going on there. You know, some aid workers were killed, landmines everywhere.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and we talked about the horrors of landmines in the last episode, didn't we? So yeah, they're definitely risk. But yeah, she put a positive spin on it, as you rightly observed.
Didn't she?
Now, I also took the opportunity whilst talking to Roberta to just ask more generally, what is Sudan like? And ask her to describe the place, and this is what she told me.
It's a tough country, but in the center of it, in the cities like Khartoum, in the villages in Darfur or in South Sudan, the people are so kind. Khartoum is like any big city in Africa, crowded, dusty, lots of activity, but it's exotic and exciting, which sounds odd probably.
It does sound odd a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I think we all probably have visions in our mind of what it might be like to be there, but to actually experience it, it must be hard to put into words. Yeah, absolutely. And I think a place, she talks about, it's odd that the place is exciting and nice in some ways, but actually it's the people that make a place, isn't it? And Roberta had a little bit more to say about the Sudanese people that she experienced who were going through these terrible times. And this is what she said.
I was impressed with their grace and their resilience and their kindness. And that's true everywhere I've gone. Wherever I go, I'm there for 6 months at the most. And I will, although I live like refugees do, I will come home to bubble baths and wine and a warm house. And they don't get that. And still, in the midst of what I see as their absolute misery, they are kind and graceful and generous.
Yeah, I can't imagine what that might be like to leave a place after 6 months, knowing that you've got to leave everyone behind.
Yeah, that must be just so hard. And we always say, Ryan, that it's the people of the country that we think about, and we look forward to things getting better for them regardless of the political situation. And I think that really sums up, all this hardship, the people are kind and graceful, and I think that really just underlines what we're about on this show, which is, think about the people. Let's just be nice to each other.
Even so, the mental toll, let alone the physical toll of doing a job like this is just extraordinary to me.
Yeah, it must be so hard. Now, I mentioned at the start that Roberta is an author, so I did ask her to tell us a little bit about the work that she creates as well as the work that she has done. And this is what she said.
My first 2 books were novels based on my aid work, Lipstick in Afghanistan and The Bracelet, then my memoir, Footprints in the Dust. And my last 4 books have been what I've always loved to read, mysteries. The first 3 mysteries were a nurse detective series, ER Nurse Solving Crimes. And the last one was published by Bloodhound in the UK, and it's called The Ambassador's Wife, and it's set in Thailand.
Okay, now I'm not sure whether Roberta has solved any crimes herself, but she's certainly written about it. Plenty to choose from if you're looking for your next book, and you can check them out at robertagately.com. But yes, we'll put a link in the notes as ever.
I'm definitely checking out those books. That sounds great. I love that idea. The nurse solving crimes.
Ah, yes, indeedy. So there it was. Roberta gave us a little insight into life on the ground in Sudan during this difficult time, and I'd really like to thank her for sharing her story with me and taking the time to talk to us today.
Yeah, Roberta, I've got to say, thank you for giving up your time to talk to us. Just absolutely fascinating. What a life you've lived. And in an age where heroes seem to be few and far between, you're definitely standing out amongst the crowd. So thank you.
Roberta Gately, we salute you.
We sure do.
And so there we were, just off the coast of Sardinia, sipping Negronis, when who should walk in but Brad Pitt?
Oh, is that right?
So over I pop, and he hands me a Negroni, like I'm in one of Clooney's Nespresso ads.
Sounds great.
We had this one steak, which the maitre d' told us had been massaged daily, seasoned with diamond dust, and grilled to the sounds of a live orchestra. It was divine.
I'm sure it was tasty.
It really was. And where did you jet off to this year?
Well, nothing much. I actually spent the summer volunteering in Sudan, helping at a refugee camp.
Oh, I see. Like some kind of exotic safari.
Well, not really. Well, not at all, actually. I just thought, with so many people in need and having the time and the skills, I thought...
But it was fun, though, right?
Well, I wouldn't say fun. No, there was a cholera outbreak. That kept us busy.
But at least you get to kick back by the pool at the end of the day, right?
Pool?
Yeah, at the hotel.
Oh, I see. No, we were just in it with everyone else, in tents and huts, that kind of thing.
Ah, right. So you went glamping.
Well, again, no, this was for emergency disaster relief.
Yeah. Tragic. Anyway, we're thinking of doing Monaco. You absolutely must come. Have you ever even been on a super yacht?
Right, and can I bring a friend or two?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure Vladimir won't mind at all.
Great, because I've got 15,000 new friends who just love a bit of bubbly on a boat.
Lovely, yeah. Looking forward to it, darling. Wait, what?
More champagne.
Oh!
All right, Peter. Well, there we go. An episode down. An episode that was a tough one, I would say.
It certainly was a challenging one to work through.
It is an extraordinary place.
Yeah, but I must admit it's not one I've put on my would like to visit at the moment list.
Yeah, I agree. But, Pete, it is that time where we must move on. We leave Sudan behind as the eyes of the audience swivel towards us as we roll out the Derzolator.
Trundle, trundle.
Here it is. Let's switch it on. Okay, Peter, let's start with a place. Our place is... It's not a country, Pete. It's an emirate.
Oh, an emirate?
It's Abu Dhabi.
Ooh.
Abu Dhabi do.
Hey.
And our time period is... 1970 to 1980.
Groovy, man. That's my childhood.
This is good. Okay, well, then it's all down to the subject matter. Here we go. Our topic is... water.
Smashed it. That's easy.
Famously deserty, isn't it?
Well, yes, but people are made of water mostly.
Nice. I like that. Yeah.
Plus, I believe there's water nearby.
I'm sure there must
be. If anyone lives there's got to be some, isn't there?
Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. So for episode 103, it's going to be water in Abu Dhabi during 1970 to 1980.
I love it.
Let's do it. Okay, well, look, there you go. That is the show for this week. So thank you all for listening. If you'd like to get in touch about any of the things that we've talked about on the show, or just to say hello, you can reach out to us through our website at hhepodcast.com or by email at peteandryan@hhepodcast.com.
Yes, indeedy. We'd love to hear from you, and you never know, you might end up featured on a future show.
That's right. And if you are on Mastodon, Instagram, Facebook, or X, you can find us at HHE Podcast.
And if you subscribe to those, you'll get an alert when we post extra content like contraband photos from Sudan.
But we are going to be back again soon with
The Verdict.
But until then, a huge thanks to Roberta.
Massive thanks to you, Roberta. That was awesome.
What was her website again?
RobertaGately.com.
And a huge thanks to you, Pete.
Well, and absolutely to you, Ryan. That was a tough but fascinating episode. I really enjoyed it.
And that is it. I guess all that's left to say is...
You've been listening to...
Sudan Seymour. Sudan Lee Seymour. It's like Suddenly Seymour. Yeah, do you know that one? Little Shop of Horrors?
No.
No?
No.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
History happened everywhere.
Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Pete.
Do you remember when I told you not to put razor blades in with the recycling?
Yes.
So one question pops into my mind. Why did you put razor blades in with the recycling?
Well, because I thought it might help us shred all of our private papers in one go.
Right. Well, look at this.
Your hand, it's ripped to shreds.
Yes, Ryan. Yes, it is.
Well, we should probably get that bandaged up and get you to the hospital.
Yes, we probably should. But the only problem is, Ryan, is that when I went to look for the first aid kit under the sink, the first aid kit under the sink wasn't under the sink.
Yeah, no, because I replaced it.
You replaced it?
Uh-huh.
And why?
Well, I read an article from the World Health Organization that said you should always refresh your first aid kit every 6 months to a year.
Right.
And so I got us a new one.
Okay, so why isn't that under the sink?
Well, it wouldn't fit under the sink.
Look, I'm bleeding out here, Ryan, and I'm starting to feel quite faint, so just tell me where the first aid kit actually is, please, before I die.
Sure. It's in the garden.
Of course, the garden. A perfect place to put a... Good Lord, what is that? It's enormous.
Well, that is the first aid kit.
Ryan, those things are meant for refugee camps in third world countries, not two blokes in Croydon.
There's all sorts in here. There's face masks and mosquito nets, couple hundred thermometers, some childbirth kits.
And do you think that'll be useful, do you?
Oh, and these too.
What are they?
Malnutrition bars. There's thousands of them in here.
Ryan, those are meant for starving children.
Yeah, I bet they are. They're delicious.
Look, just give me a bandage and get all of this out of our garden.
Seriously, though. They're really good.
You know what? On second thoughts, maybe we should keep this stuff.
Really?
Yeah, I'm starting to get a funny feeling we're going to need a lot of bandages in the next 6 months.
Oh, why's that? Ow!
Oh, do you need a bandage, Ryan?
Yeah, I think a bandage would be great. Thanks.
Here you go, mate.
Can I have another one of those bars as well? I'm feeling a bit malnourished.
No, you can't.
But it'll help with my shock.
How's your shock now?
Ow!
Oh dear, let's stop.
Bye.
Hello, lovely YouTube folks. This is a special message just for you.
Yeah, thanks for listening all the way to the end.
Now, if you enjoyed the show, please let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
And don't forget to take a moment to hit that like and smash subscribe.
Hit that like.
Yeah.
Smash subscribe.
Yeah, it's what people say.
Do they though?
Yeah, only the cool kids.
And you think you're the cool kids, do you?
No, we're the cool kids.
Oh yeah, I suppose we are. All right, smash that like button, people. Smash it real good.
Oh yeah, nice.